I'm Captain Stephanie Crest, 32 years old, a former Army medic who earned the Purple Heart after 2 tours in Afghanistan. For years, I was the dependable daughter, the one who sent money home, covered late bills, and made my parents proud from a distance. But when I came back with PTSD, they laughed. At Sunday dinner, my mom said, "Stop pretending, you were never in real danger." My dad laughed with her. The next morning, they saw my face on the front page. Veteran receives Purple Heart for heroic actions in Afghanistan. 57 missed calls. The last voicemail said, "We didn't know. Please call us." Have you ever been dismissed or humiliated by the people you do anything for? If so, tell me your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to stand up for yourself after being doubted, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about courage, boundaries, and reclaiming your worth. What came after might surprise you. I grew up in a modest house on the outskirts of Charleston, the kind of place where the paint peeled in soft curls and the porch light flickered when it rained. I was the quiet achiever, the one who fixed the leaking sink with duct tape and YouTube tutorials, who paid my parents' late bills without asking for thanks, who carried their pride on my shoulders without complaint. My name is Captain Stephanie Crest, though back then I was just Stephanie, the girl who tried too hard and talked too little. My mother, Marlene, had been a nurse before she became a homemaker. She loved appearances more than honesty, loved the idea of a perfect family more than the messy reality of one. She'd straighten the throw pillows before guests arrived and laugh too brightly at jokes that weren't funny. My father, Frank, was a retired construction foreman with hands like worn leather and a belief that emotions were a weakness. He'd grunt instead of hug, nod instead of listen. They weren't cruel people. They were just small in the ways that mattered. From childhood, I played the role of protector. I tutored my younger brother Evan through algebra when he struggled, took double shifts at the campus bookstore to keep myself fed, and eventually enlisted in the Army to pay for grad school. My parents called it a phase. When I told them I'd sign the papers, my mother set down her coffee cup and said, "Well, I suppose you'll get it out of your system." My father just shook his head and went back to his crossword. When I left for my first deployment, Marlene told the neighbors I was doing office work overseas. She never once mentioned that her daughter was with a combat medic unit in Helmand Province, that I slept in a tent that smelled like diesel and dust, that I learned to sleep through the sound of distant explosions. She sent care packages with scented candles and magazines about home decor, as if I could light lavender votives in a war zone and everything would be fine. I wrote letters home every week. I told them about the heat, about the mountains, about the people I served with. I didn't tell them about the convoys or the checkpoints or the way your hands shake after you've pulled someone bleeding from a vehicle. I kept it light, kept it clean, kept it safe for them. Even from 7,000 miles away, I protected them from the truth. Evan was 17 when I deployed the first time. He was gangly and awkward, obsessed with video games and coding tutorials. I'd call him when I could, ask about school, about his projects, about whether he was eating enough vegetables. He'd tell me about his latest app idea or some girl he liked, and I'd listen and laugh and pretend I wasn't exhausted. He never asked what I did all day. I think he was afraid to know. My second deployment came 2 years later. By then, I'd been promoted to sergeant and moved to a different unit. My parents threw a small going-away dinner with dry chicken and store-bought cake. My mother took photos for Facebook with the caption, "Our girls going on another adventure." My father clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Stay out of trouble." I smiled and nodded and packed my duffel bag in silence. Helmand Province was different the second time. I knew what to expect, the boredom punctuated by terror, the way sand gets into everything, the particular quiet that comes before something goes wrong. I knew how to move, how to think, how to survive. What I didn't know was how to come back from it intact. The ambush happened on a Tuesday. We were returning from a supply run when the IED went off. I remember the flash, the pressure wave, the way sound disappears and then rushes back all at once. I remember dragging Sergeant Maya DeLuca from the burning vehicle, her blood on my hands, her weight against my chest. I remember pulling 2 others to safety before the medevac arrived. I remember everything and nothing, the way trauma does. Maya died in my arms. She was 26, from Brooklyn, obsessed with terrible reality TV and her niece's ballet recitals. She was my best friend, my anchor, the person who made me laugh when nothing was funny. She bled out while I held pressure on wounds that wouldn't stop bleeding, while I whispered promises I couldn't keep. The medics arrived 4 minutes later. 4 minutes too late. I didn't tell my parents about Maya when I called home 2 weeks later. I told them I was fine, that everything was fine, that I'd be home soon. My mother said, "Well, that's good, sweetheart. Your father's putting in new countertops." I listened to her talk about granite samples and said all the right things and hung up feeling more alone than I'd felt in the desert. When I came home after my honorable discharge, they picked me up from the airport with a handmade welcome sign and balloons. Marlene hugged me too tight and cried into my shoulder. Frank carried my bag and asked if I was hungry. We drove home in traffic, and nobody mentioned the way I flinched when a motorcycle backfired near us on the highway. Nobody asked about the scars on my hands or the new lines around my eyes. We just drove, and I stared out the window, and we all pretended I was the same person who'd left. I moved into a small apartment near the coast, got a job at a veterans outreach center, started therapy twice a week. The nightmares came in waves. Some weeks were manageable, others left me hollow-eyed and shaking. I learned to navigate the civilian world like it was foreign territory, relearning how to buy groceries without scanning for exits, how to sit in a coffee shop without my back to the wall, how to exist in a body that still thought it was in danger. My parents visited once a month for Sunday dinners. We'd eat roasted chicken or pasta or whatever Marlene brought in Tupperware, and we'd talk about safe things, Evan's new job, the weather, neighborhood gossip. They never asked about the war. They never asked about therapy. It was as if those 2 years had been erased, replaced with a polite fiction that was easier for everyone to swallow. I let them believe it because I didn't know how to tell them the truth without breaking something that felt already broken. The family dynamic never changed, even after everything. I gave loyalty and effort. They offered polite disbelief and careful distance. I showed up, smiled, nodded, played my role. They asked nothing real, and I offered nothing raw. We existed in parallel, close enough to touch, too far apart to reach. It was a kind of survival, I suppose. Just not the kind that heals. Years later, after 2 tours and an honorable discharge, I returned to a life that no longer fit. Everything felt too loud or too quiet, too fast or too still. I startled at fireworks, avoided crowds, barely slept more than 4 hours at a stretch. But I tried to smile through it, tried to act normal, tried to be the daughter they wanted me to be. At a summer barbecue at my parents' house, the neighborhood gathered for burgers and beer and small talk. I stood near the fence, nursing a soda, when a car backfired on the street. The sound cracked through the air and I dropped to a crouch, heart hammering, hands reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. When I looked up, people were staring. My mother laughed, bright, nervous, embarrassed. "Oh, come on, sweetheart," she said, touching my arm like she could brush it away. "You were never actually in the fight, right?" My father stood by the grill, spatula in hand, and smirked. "You're tougher than that. Don't start all that PTSD talk." They spoke like my memories were exaggerations, stories told too often and embellished with each retelling. Like I was making it up for attention or sympathy or some other currency I didn't need. I straightened, forced a smile, and said something about being tired. Nobody pushed. Nobody asked. The conversation moved on to someone's new deck, and I stood there feeling invisible and exposed all at once. My younger brother Evan, now a software engineer at some startup downtown, changed the subject to something lighter. He was good at that, deflecting, smoothing over, keeping the peace. He'd always been conflict-averse, more comfortable with code than emotion. I didn't blame him. I'd spent most of his childhood being the strong one, the responsible one, the one who didn't need help. Why would he know how to help me now? My therapy appointments became my thing, a quiet routine they avoided mentioning. Twice a week I'd drive to a small office near the university and sit across from Dr. Rivera, who had kind eyes and never pushed too hard. She taught me grounding techniques, helped me process what I could process, held space for what I couldn't. Some days I talked. Some days I just sat there, staring at the clock, trying to remember how to breathe normally. She never made me feel broken, just hurt. There's a difference. But at home, with my parents, therapy was something we didn't discuss. If Marlene saw the appointment reminders on my phone, she'd look away quickly. If Frank noticed the books on trauma recovery on my passenger seat, he'd change the subject to something safer: sports, weather, the price of gas. It was easier for them if I kept that part of my life separate, sealed off, invisible. So I did. Bit by bit, I learned to talk less and nod more. I stopped trying to explain what it felt like to carry someone's death in your hands, to hear their last breath, to come home and pretend you were fine. I stopped mentioning the nightmares or the hypervigilance or the way certain smells could send me back to that moment in the desert. I smiled at family dinners, asked about their lives, kept mine locked away. Silence became my safest answer. Evan started inviting me to things less often. Not out of cruelty, I think, but out of awkwardness. He didn't know what to say to me anymore, didn't know which version of his sister I was now. The fun one who used to take him to arcade bars? The serious one who stared too long at nothing? He settled for text messages about funny memes and surface-level check-ins. I appreciated the effort even as I felt the distance growing. I tried dating once, a guy I met at a coffee shop who worked in IT and had an easy smile. We went out 3 times before he asked why I was so jumpy, why I never wanted to go to crowded restaurants, why I checked my phone compulsively like I was waiting for bad news. I told him a partial truth, that I'd been in the army, that it had been hard. He nodded, said he understood, and then slowly stopped texting. People say they want honesty until they get it. My mother started sending me articles about yoga and meditation, about natural remedies for stress. She meant well, I think. She wanted to fix me with green smoothies and positive thinking, wanted to believe that her daughter just needed to relax more, eat better, try harder. I thanked her for each article and never mentioned that I was already doing all of it, that some wounds don't heal with herbal tea and deep breathing. At work, I was functional. I helped veterans navigate benefits paperwork, connected them with resources, listened to their stories without judgment. It was easier to help others than to help myself. Their struggles felt real and valid in ways mine didn't, at least not to my family. At least there, with people who understood, I didn't have to explain why a helicopter overhead could ruin my whole afternoon. The holidays were the hardest. Thanksgiving, Christmas, 4th of July, all of them loaded with noise and expectation and the pressure to perform normalcy. I'd show up with a bottle of wine or a dish to share, paste on a smile, and count the hours until I could leave. My mother would take photos for her albums, proof of a happy family, and I'd smile for the camera because it was easier than the alternative. I started running early in the mornings, before the sun came up, when the streets were empty and quiet. It helped, the repetitive motion, the controlled breathing, the way my body could be exhausted in a way that felt clean. I'd run until my legs burned and my lungs ached and the noise in my head quieted just enough to face another day. My parents never asked why I ran so much, never asked why I'd lost weight or why I kept my apartment so sparse and organized. They never asked because they didn't want to know. Knowing meant acknowledging, and acknowledging meant confronting their own discomfort with what I'd been through. It was easier to pretend I was fine, that time and distance had healed everything, that their daughter had come home whole. But I hadn't. And every time they laughed off my struggles or changed the subject or treated my trauma like an inconvenient personality quirk, the distance between us grew wider. Until silence became my safest answer. Until I stopped expecting them to understand. Until I built a life around the empty space where their support should have been. It happened during one of their routine Sunday dinners, the kind we'd been having for months. Roast chicken, soft jazz playing from the kitchen speaker, the careful illusion of family normalcy. I sat at the table I'd eaten at since childhood, the same scratched surface, the same mismatched chairs, everything familiar and foreign all at once. Marlene set down her wine glass with a soft clink and looked at me with that expression she got when she was about to say something she thought was helpful. "Your cousin saw your VA paperwork on the counter last week," she said lightly, like she was mentioning the weather. "PTSD? Stephanie, stop pretending. You were never in real danger." The words hung in the air. I felt my spine straighten involuntarily, muscle memory from years of standing at attention. Frank chuckled from across the table, shaking his head in that way he did when he thought something was ridiculous. "You're turning into one of those veterans who blame the war for everything," he said, cutting into his chicken. "You've got to move on, kid." The laughter echoed, small, casual, deadly. My mother sipped her wine. My father chewed his food. Evan looked down at his plate, silent as always, conflict-averse as ever. The jazz played on. Nobody seemed to notice that they'd just dismissed the worst thing that had ever happened to me like it was a made-up story, an excuse, a character flaw. I didn't argue. Arguing would have required energy I didn't have, would have opened a door I'd kept carefully closed. I placed my napkin neatly beside my plate, the way they'd taught me as a child. I stood, pushed my chair in, and said quietly, "You'll never understand." My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. I was calm in the way you get calm when something inside you breaks so completely that feeling it would be too dangerous. So you just stop feeling. You move mechanically. You function. "Honey, don't be dramatic," my mother said, but I was already walking toward the door. I grabbed my jacket from the hook, my keys from the bowl by the entrance. Frank called after me, something about me being too sensitive, about needing thicker skin. I didn't turn around. I opened the front door and stepped into the evening air, cool and clean after the suffocating warmth inside. The door clicked shut behind me like the end of a long illusion. I walked to my car, got in, started the engine. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just drove home in silence, the city lights blurring past, and felt the careful distance I'd maintained for years finally solidify into something permanent. That night, I sat on my balcony staring at a photo of my unit, dust-covered, exhausted, alive. Maya was in the center, her arm around my shoulders, both of us grinning despite the heat and the fear and the knowledge that any day could be our last. She'd been 26 when she died, full of plans and dreams and a future that never came. I'd held her as she bled out from wounds no one could fix. I'd whispered promises I couldn't keep, that she'd be okay, that help was coming, that she'd see her niece's next ballet recital. I'd felt her pulse weaken and stop beneath my fingers. I'd carried her blood on my uniform for hours afterward because there was no time to change, no time to process, no time to fall apart. After the medevac took her body away, I'd gone back into the vehicle and pulled 2 others to safety. Private Chin, who had a concussion and a broken arm. Corporal Williams, who was trapped under twisted metal and screaming. I'd worked with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, with a mind that had gone somewhere cold and distant just to keep functioning. I'd done my job because that's what you do. You don't get to fall apart until later. Later came in waves. In therapy sessions where I couldn't speak. In nightmares where I relived it frame by frame. In moments like tonight, sitting alone on my balcony, realizing that the people who were supposed to love me most had just called the worst thing I'd ever experienced fake. I'd buried those memories to keep my parents comfortable. I'd smiled through dinners and answered their surface-level questions and never told them what I really carried. I'd protected them from the weight of my trauma the same way I'd protected my unit from enemy fire, instinctively, without question, at my own expense. And they'd mocked the scars I carried for doing exactly that. I texted Lieutenant Avery Cross, my old commanding officer and now one of my few friends who understood. "You up?" The reply came 30 seconds later. "Always. Call me." Avery picked up on the first ring. I could hear traffic in the background, city sounds, normal life. "What happened?" I told her. Not the long version, just the facts. Family dinner. Comments about faking PTSD. The laughter. Avery was quiet for a long moment. "They'll never get it," I said finally. "They don't have to," Avery replied, her voice steady and sure. "But someday they'll see." I didn't ask what she meant. Didn't have the energy. We talked for a while longer about nothing important, the kind of conversation that's really just about not being alone. When we hung up, I felt marginally less hollow. I looked at the photo again. Maya's smile. The mountains in the background. The way we'd all looked so young despite everything. I'd survived when she hadn't. I'd come home when she was buried in a flag-draped coffin. And my parents thought I was pretending. I set the photo down and went inside. Tomorrow, I'd go to work. Tomorrow, I'd help other veterans. Tomorrow, I'd keep moving forward because that's what you do. But tonight, in the quiet of my apartment, I let myself feel the full weight of their betrayal. I let myself acknowledge that the people who should have stood by me had instead stood against me. And I realized, with a clarity that was both liberating and devastating, that I didn't need their understanding anymore. I didn't need their approval or their belief or their carefully maintained illusions. I needed to survive. And I needed to do it without them. The phone stayed silent that night. No apologetic texts, no concerned calls. Just silence. And in that silence, I began to understand what Avery had meant. Someday they'd see. But not because I'd convinced them. Because the truth has a way of revealing itself, whether we're ready for it or not. I didn't realize how literal those words would become. Weeks later, I received an official notice in the mail. Heavy paper, government letterhead, the kind of document that carries weight even before you open it. I stood in my kitchen, morning light streaming through the window, just been trying to keep people alive. I thought about skipping it. Just letting them mail the medals, quietly accepting them, moving on. Nobody needed to know. I could keep it private, keep it mine, avoid the spectacle. I'd spent years trying to be invisible, why stop now? But Avery called me the night before the ceremony. You ready? She asked. I'm thinking about not going. Silence on the other end, the kind that meant she was choosing her words carefully. Why? Because I don't want to make it a thing. Because it feels performative. Because you're afraid your parents will see. I didn't answer, which was answer enough. Stephanie, Avery said, her voice firm but kind, you earned this. It's not a performance, it's truth. What you did that day saved lives. You don't have to shrink yourself to make other people comfortable anymore. I sat with that for a long moment, phone pressed to my ear, thinking about all the times I'd made myself smaller to fit their expectations. All the times I'd downplayed my service, my struggles, my reality. All the times I'd protected them from the truth because the truth was too much. You still there? Avery asked. Yeah. I'll go. Good. I'll be in the second row. The next morning, I put on my dress uniform. It still fit perfectly, pressed and sharp, the kind of precise that the Army drills into you. I looked at myself in the mirror, medals I'd already earned on my chest, the insignia of my rank, the quiet weight of everything I'd been through reflected back at me. I drove to Columbia alone, windows down, trying to breathe through the anxiety. The state military headquarters was impressive, brick and columns and flags snapping in the wind. People in uniform moved purposefully across the grounds. I parked and sat in my car for 5 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, gathering courage. Inside, the ceremony room was formal and hushed. Rows of chairs, a podium, flags standing at attention. Avery caught my eye from where she sat and gave me a small nod. Other veterans filled the seats, some in uniform, some not. People who understood. People who'd been there, wherever there had been. General Dominic Hayes presided over the ceremony. He was in his 60s, with a presence that commanded respect without demanding it. When my name was called, I walked to the front, spine straight, eyes forward. The room was silent except for the sound of my footsteps. General Hayes read the citation aloud. The date, the location, the circumstances. For extraordinary heroism in combat operations against enemy forces. Sergeant Crest, under heavy fire and at great personal risk, pulled multiple wounded soldiers from a burning vehicle and administered life-saving medical care. Her actions directly resulted in the survival of 2 soldiers and exemplified the highest traditions of military service. The words felt surreal, like they were describing someone else. But they weren't. They were describing me. What I'd done. What I'd carried. He pinned the Purple Heart to my chest first, then the Bronze Star. His hands were steady. Mine weren't. When he stepped back and saluted, I returned it, sharp and clean, and something inside me that had been wound tight for years loosened just slightly. Cameras flashed. I stood at attention, letting them take their photos, letting the moment be documented. Afterward, people shook my hand, thanked me for my service, said things that were well-meaning but didn't quite land. Avery pulled me into a brief hug and whispered, "Told you." The story ran in the Charleston Post and Courier the next day. Front page, above the fold. My photo in full dress uniform, saluting, the headline in bold print, "Veteran receives Purple Heart for heroic actions in Afghanistan." The article included details about the ambush, about Sergeant DeLuca's death, about my actions that day. It named me as Captain Crest, the rank I'd held at discharge, and included quotes from General Hayes about bravery and sacrifice. It was thorough, respectful, and very, very public. That morning, Marlene nearly dropped her coffee when she saw it. She'd been standing in her kitchen, scanning the paper like she did every morning, when she saw my face staring back at her. She called Frank over, hands shaking slightly, and they read it together in stunned silence. Their daughter. In combat. Under fire. Saving lives. Everything they dismissed as exaggeration or pretending laid out in black and white with photographic evidence and official military recognition. The missed calls started around 8 in the morning. I watched my phone light up again and again. Mom, Dad, Mom, Dad, Evan, Mom. I didn't answer. I was at work, helping a veteran navigate disability paperwork, and I let every call go to voicemail. By the end of the day, there were 57 missed calls. I drove home in silence, phone face down on the passenger seat, and tried to process what came next. When I finally pulled into my parking spot and checked the voicemails, I listened to them in chronological order. The first few were confused, surprised, asking me to call back. Then came the urgent ones, the apologetic ones, the ones where I could hear tears in my mother's voice and tightness in my father's. The last voicemail was from Marlene, left at 6:30 in the evening. "Stephanie, we saw the paper. Please call us. We didn't know. We're so sorry. We didn't know. Please, sweetheart, please call us back." Her voice cracked on the last word. I saved the voicemail and sat in my car, staring at nothing, feeling nothing and everything all at once. They knew now. Finally, irrevocably, they knew. I didn't pick up. Not that night, not the next day, not the day after that. I let the calls dwindle to texts, let the texts go unanswered, and poured my energy into helping others instead. I volunteered more hours at the Veterans Resilience Network, a nonprofit that connected former service members with mental health resources and peer support. The work was hard but honest, sitting with people who'd been through hell, helping them navigate systems that felt designed to break them, offering the kind of understanding that only comes from shared experience. I spoke quietly to young soldiers about invisible wounds, about the way trauma doesn't always announce itself with physical scars. I told them about therapy, about medication, about the long, slow work of healing. I never mentioned the medals or the ceremony or the newspaper article. That wasn't the point. The point was showing up. Meanwhile, back in Charleston, my parents' world was shifting in ways I wasn't there to witness. Their friends started calling me our local hero, sharing the article on social media, asking Marlene and Frank questions they couldn't answer. What was she like during her service? Did she talk about what happened? Were they at the ceremony? Frank, who'd spent years avoiding any real conversation about my military experience, suddenly displayed the newspaper photo in his workshop. He framed it carefully, hung it near his workbench where customers could see it. When people asked, he'd tell them with unmistakable pride, "That's my daughter." Marlene posted an old childhood picture of me on Facebook, maybe 5 years old, missing a front tooth, wearing a too big t-shirt. The caption read, "Proud Army Mom," with an American flag emoji. People who knew better didn't comment. People who didn't send congratulations. I saw it all through mutual friends, through Evan, who texted me screenshots with messages like, "They're really going through it, and think you should call them?" I didn't respond to those either. I wasn't being cruel. I just didn't have it in me to make them feel better about their own guilt. But I smiled when I saw the posts, smiled without bitterness, which surprised me. For once, I didn't feel the need to correct their narrative or point out the hypocrisy or demand acknowledgement of how wrong they'd been. I'd outgrown their approval somewhere between the ceremony and now. Their validation, when it finally came, felt less like victory and more like an irrelevant footnote. In therapy, Dr. Rivera and I worked on untangling guilt from duty. She asked me questions I'd been avoiding for years. Why did you feel responsible for your parents' comfort? Why did you believe their version of your story over your own lived experience? Why did you think you needed to earn their belief? I didn't have good answers at first. Just patterns worn deep from childhood: protect, perform, prove yourself, repeat. The quiet achiever who fixed things and expected nothing in return. But slowly, session by session, I began to understand that bravery wasn't just about what happened in war. It was about how you live after. It was about choosing truth over comfort, even when truth was harder. Even when truth meant standing alone. I started writing in the evenings, not for publication or posterity, just to process. I wrote about Maya, about the ambush, about coming home to a country that thanked me for my service, but didn't want to hear what that service actually cost. I wrote about family dinners and silent treatments and the particular loneliness of being misunderstood by the people who should understand you most. Some nights I cried while I wrote. Some nights the words came clean and clear. All of it mattered. All of it was real. I didn't need my parents' newspaper-inspired revelation to make it true. Evan called me one evening, his voice hesitant. They really are sorry, you know. They feel terrible. I know, I said. Are you going to talk to them? Eventually. When I'm ready. When will that be? I looked out at the darkening sky, at the ocean in the distance, at the life I'd built brick by brick without their help. I don't know yet. He was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, I'm sorry too. I should have said something at that dinner. I should have backed you up. Yeah, I said softly. You should have. I know. I was a coward. You were scared. There's a difference. We talked a while longer, the kind of real conversation we hadn't had in years. When we hung up, I felt something shift slightly, not forgiveness exactly, but the possibility of it. The understanding that people fail each other in small and large ways, and healing means deciding which failures you can live with. The Veterans Resilience Network asked me to speak at a fundraiser. I almost said no. Public speaking still made my palms sweat, but Avery was there when they asked, and she gave me a look that said, "You can do this." So I did. I stood in front of a room full of donors and supporters and told them about invisible wounds, about the soldiers who came home with all their limbs intact but broken in ways that didn't show on X-rays. I didn't tell Maya's story. That was hers, not mine to share. But I told them about the work we did, about the lives we helped rebuild, about the importance of showing up even when it was hard. People clapped. Some cried. An older veteran approached me afterward, shook my hand, and said simply, "Thank you for saying it." I nodded, throat tight, understanding exactly what he meant. Months passed. Fall turned to winter. I kept working, kept healing, kept building a life that felt honest even when it was hard. My parents' calls became less frequent, less desperate, settling into a new pattern of careful distance. They were learning, I supposed, that some bridges take time to rebuild. That some apologies need to be lived, not just spoken. I still thought about Maya most days. I still had nightmares sometimes, still flinched at unexpected sounds, still carried the weight of that day in ways I probably always would. But I was learning that surviving meant more than just staying alive. It meant choosing to live fully, to speak truthfully, to stop protecting people from realities they needed to face. And slowly, painfully, honestly, I was learning to do exactly that. Months later, on a cool Saturday in early spring, I agreed to meet my parents at a quiet diner near the coast. No uniforms, no ceremony, no newspaper articles, just three people with too much to say and not enough words for any of it. I arrived first, chose a booth near the back with a view of the parking lot. Old habit, always knowing the exits. The diner smelled like coffee and bacon grease, comfortable and anonymous. I ordered water and waited, watching the door. They arrived together, looking older than I remembered. Marlene's hair had more gray. Frank moved a little slower, favoring his left knee. They spotted me and hesitated for just a moment before walking over. My mother slid into the booth across from me, my father beside her. Nobody reached for hugs. "Thank you for meeting us," Marlene said quietly. I nodded. The waitress came, took our orders, disappeared. Silence settled over the table like dust. Finally, Frank cleared his throat. We've been thinking about what to say to you for months now. Practiced it, wrote it down, threw it away. He looked down at his hands, work-worn and uncertain. Nothing felt good enough. We were wrong, Marlene said, her voice cracking slightly. About everything. About what you went through. About what you carried. She stopped, pressed her napkin to her eyes. We laughed because we were scared. We thought if we pretended it wasn't that bad, then it wouldn't be. We thought pretending meant you were okay. I watched them struggle, these people who'd raised me and failed me in equal measure. Part of me wanted to make it easier, to say it was fine, to smooth things over the way I always had. But I didn't. I let the silence hold. Frank's eyes were wet when he finally looked at me. I didn't want to picture my little girl under fire. Didn't want to imagine you in danger, hurt, carrying. He swallowed hard. Carrying what you've been carrying. So I convinced myself it wasn't real. That you were exaggerating. That it couldn't be as bad as you made it seem. It was worse, I said quietly. It was worse than anything I told you, because I never told you the actual truth. I protected you from it. I know, he said. I know that now. Our food arrived. None of us touched it. Marlene reached across the table, stopped halfway, pulled her hand back. I saw the photo in your apartment once. The one of your unit. That woman next to you, Maya. Maya, she repeated carefully. She died. In the ambush. In my arms, I said, and watched them both flinch. She bled out while I tried to stop it. She was my best friend. She was 26. The silence that followed was different this time. Heavier. Real. We can't fix this, I said finally. You can't apologize enough times to undo what happened at that dinner, or all the times before it when you made me feel like I was making it up. You can't take back the years I spent protecting you from the truth while you accused me of lying about it. We know, Marlene whispered. But, I continued, I didn't come here for an apology. I came because Evan asked me to, and because Dr. Rivera, my therapist, said that closure doesn't always look like forgiveness. Sometimes it just looks like honesty. Frank wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. What do you need from us? I thought about that. What did I need? For them to understand? They never fully would. For them to fix it? They couldn't. For them to witness what I'd been through? Too late for that. I need you to stop rewriting history, I said. Stop posting about being a proud Army mom when you spent years pretending I did office work. Stop displaying my medals when you called my PTSD fake. If you're going to be in my life, I need you to be honest about who you were and who you're trying to become. I need you to sit with your own discomfort instead of making me manage it for you. They both nodded, solemn and small across the table. And I need you to understand that I'm not the daughter you wanted me to be. I'm not whole in the way you want me to be. I have nightmares. I have triggers. I'm in therapy, and I'll probably be in therapy for years. That's not a phase. That's not something I need to get over. That's my reality, and if you can't accept it without minimizing it, then we can't do this. We want to try, Marlene said. We want to do better. We know we can't undo the damage, but we want to try. I picked up my fork, moved food around my plate. Then try. Don't tell me how proud you are. Show up. Ask real questions. Sit with uncomfortable answers. Stop performing for your friends and actually be present with me. Okay, Frank said. Okay. We ate in silence for a while. The food was mediocre but warm, the diner noise a comfortable buffer around our quiet table. When the check came, Frank reached for it instinctively, but I took it instead. I've got it, I said. He didn't argue. Outside, the spring air was cool and clean. We stood in the parking lot, 3 people connected by blood and history and a canyon of hurt that might never fully close. Can we call you? Marlene asked. Not all the time, just, can we? Yeah, I said. You can call. She nodded, teary again. Frank put his hand on her shoulder. They walked to their car together, older and smaller than I remembered them being. I watched them drive away, then sat in my own car for a long moment, processing. That night, we spoke, really spoke, for the first time in years. Not perfectly, not without pain, but honestly. Human and flawed and finally, tentatively real. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. Maybe never completely. But it was a beginning. Or an ending. Or both. When I got home, I called Dr. Rivera even though it was Saturday night. She answered on the third ring. I met with them, I said. How did it go? I don't know. Different. Real. That's good, she said. Real is good. We talked for 20 minutes. When we hung up, I felt exhausted and lighter at the same time, like I'd put down something I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was heavy. I pulled out the photo of my unit, looked at Maya's smile. I told them, I said to her face, frozen forever at 26. I told them the truth. The photo didn't answer, but I felt something subtle anyway. Some debt I'd imagined I owed, some protection I'd thought I had to provide, some performance I'd believed was necessary, all of it finally, blessedly done. That night I slept better than I had in months. No nightmares, no jolting awake, just deep dreamless dark. When I woke up, the sun was streaming through my window and my phone showed a single text from my mother. Thank you for yesterday. I didn't respond right away. I made coffee, went for a run, showered, sat with my own thoughts. Then, finally, I typed back, thank you for listening. It wasn't much, but it was honest. And honest, I was learning, was enough. Years later, I stand on a stage at a university auditorium, addressing a room of ROTC cadets. The space is formal but lived in, with scuff marks on the wooden floors and inspirational posters on the walls. 200 young faces look up at me, some eager, some skeptical, all of them trying to figure out what they're getting themselves into. Behind me, the projection screen shows a photo of my squad, the same one I've kept all these years. Dust-covered, exhausted, alive. Maya is there, arm around my shoulders, both of us grinning like we knew something the camera didn't. Sergeant Chin and Corporal Williams are there too, the ones I pulled from the burning vehicle. Everyone who made it home, and everyone who didn't, frozen together in a moment before everything changed. My parents sit quietly in the back row. No cameras, no Facebook posts, no performance. Just presence. They've been showing up like this for 2 years now, small, consistent, real. Coffee meetups where we talk about actual things. Therapy sessions they attended when I asked them to, sitting uncomfortable in folding chairs while Dr. Rivera explained secondary trauma and family systems. Holidays where I leave early if I need to, and they don't take it personally anymore. It's not perfect. Frank still struggles with my bad days, still wants to fix things that can't be fixed. Marlene still occasionally posts things that make me wince, still sometimes treats my service like a story she tells rather than a thing I lived. But they're trying. Genuinely, imperfectly trying. And I've learned that's enough. Evan sits beside them, his wife Sarah next to him. They got married last year, a small ceremony I actually enjoyed because they kept it simple and didn't make me walk down any aisles or be in any photos I didn't want. Sarah works in veteran mental health advocacy, which Evan swears is a coincidence, but I know better. He's been doing his own work, his own growing up. We talk more now, real conversations about real things. I look out at the cadets and begin. Most of you are here because you want to serve. Because you believe in something bigger than yourselves. That's good. That's necessary. But I'm not here to tell you about glory or heroism or any of the things that look good on recruiting posters. I click to the next slide, a definition of moral injury, of survivor's guilt, of post-traumatic stress. I'm here to tell you that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's not charging into battle or making the heroic choice. Courage is walking back into your life afterward and doing the work to stay alive in it. Courage is asking for help when everything in you says you should be strong enough to handle it alone. Courage is letting people see you broken and trusting them not to use it against you. I tell them about Maya without using her name, about holding someone while they die, about the weight of surviving when someone else doesn't. I tell them about coming home and feeling like an alien in your own life, about relationships that don't survive the distance, about families that don't understand. If you serve, some of you will see combat. Some of you won't. Both experiences can break you in different ways. The question isn't whether you'll struggle. It's whether you'll let yourself be honest about the struggle. A young woman in the front row has tears in her eyes. A man near the back is nodding slowly, like I'm confirming something he already suspected. These are the ones who get it, who'll remember this talk when they need it. I talk about resources, therapy, peer support groups, the Veterans Resilience Network. I talk about warning signs and how to help a friend who's struggling. I talk about the difference between being strong and pretending to be strong. The military will teach you how to fight, I say. But nobody really teaches you how to come home. You'll have to learn that part yourself. And it's okay if it takes longer than you think it should. It's okay if it takes years. It's okay if you need help. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. When I open the floor for questions, hands shoot up. They ask about deployment, about leadership, about how to talk to family members who don't understand. I answer honestly, pulling from my own experience, from the experiences of the veterans I work with. One cadet asks if it gets easier. It gets different, I say. You learn to carry it better. You learn what helps and what doesn't. You build a life that makes room for both who you were and who you are now. It's not easy, but it's possible. Afterward, students line up to talk to me. Some want advice. Some just want to shake my hand, thank me for my honesty. A young man who can't be more than 19 tells me his brother came back from Iraq changed, and he's been trying to understand. Tell him you see him, I say. Tell him you know it's hard. And tell him you're there, no pressure, whenever he's ready. The kid nods, emotional. Thank you, ma'am. Avery appears from the wings, gives me a bottle of water and a knowing smile. Good talk, Crest. You think so? I think you told the truth. That's always good. My parents approach slowly, respectfully waiting until the crowd thins. Marlene's eyes are red, but she's not crying, not making it about her. Frank just nods, the kind of nod that says more than words could. Proud of you, kid, he says simply. It's not the first time he's said it in the past few years. But this time, it lands differently. This time, he knows what he's proud of, not the medals or the ceremony or the newspaper articles, but the work. The showing up. The truth-telling. The courage it takes to keep going. Thanks, Dad, I say. We walk out together into the early evening light. The campus is beautiful this time of year, trees blooming, students scattered across the quad. My phone buzzes with a text from the Veterans Resilience Network, a young Marine asking if I have time to meet next week. I type back that I do. Dinner. Marlene asks tentatively. I check my watch, consider my energy level, remind myself that I'm allowed to say no. But tonight, I have room for it. Yeah, dinner sounds good. We walk to the parking lot together, not quite close, but not distant either. Evan tells a story about his work, something funny about a coding error. Sarah asks about my next speaking engagement. Frank mentions he's finally reading one of the books I recommended about veteran mental health. It's ordinary and imperfect and real. No dramatic reconciliation, no perfect healing, no tidy resolution. Just a family learning to exist together with honesty instead of illusion. Just people doing their best with the damage they've caused and survived. As we drive in separate cars to the restaurant, I catch my reflection in the rearview mirror. The Purple Heart is pinned to my lapel. I wear it sometimes now, not to prove anything, but to remember. To honor. To carry. No revenge. No triumph. Just truth, visible, unshakable, finally my own. At the restaurant, we sit in a booth and order food. The conversation flows easier now, lubricated by years of practice and genuine effort. Marlene asks about my therapy, really asks, ready to hear a real answer. Frank tells me about a veteran he met at the hardware store, how they talked for an hour about shared experiences. I gave him your number, Frank says. Hope that's okay. Told him you do advocacy work. That's fine, I say. That's good. Evan shows me photos of their new apartment, tells me they're thinking about kids in a year or two. You'd be a good aunt, he says. I'd try, I say. The food comes. We eat and talk and exist together in a way that would have seemed impossible 3 years ago. When Marlene reaches across the table to squeeze my hand, I let her. When Frank pays the check despite my protests, I let him have that too. Outside, in the parking lot, under a sky going pink and gold, Marlene hugs me. Brief, wordless, but real. Frank claps my shoulder, his eyes saying things he still doesn't have words for. Evan pulls me into a proper hug and whispers, "Thanks for not giving up on us." I drive home as the sun sets, windows down, music playing softly. The ocean appears in glimpses between buildings, vast and constant and indifferent to human drama. When I get home, I change out of my professional clothes, make tea, sit on my balcony. The photo of my unit is on the table beside me. I pick it up, look at Maya's face, at the mountains behind us, at who we were in that captured moment. We did good, I say to her. I think we did good. The evening breeze carries the smell of salt and growing things. Somewhere in the distance, fireworks pop, someone's celebration, someone's joy. I don't flinch. I just listen, noting the sound, letting it be what it is. My phone lights up with a text from Dr. Rivera. How'd the talk go? Good, I type back. Really good. Proud of you, she responds. I set the phone down and sit with that pride, earned and witnessed and real. Not the performance kind, not the desperate for approval kind, but the quiet, solid kind that comes from doing hard things honestly. The sun finishes setting. The stars begin to appear. And I sit there, Captain Stephanie Crest, survivor and advocate and imperfect daughter, carrying my truth with both hands. Visible. Unshakable. Finally, completely my own. I spend the next year building something I never expected, a life that feels like mine. Not the life my parents imagined, not the life the Army prepared me for, not the life I thought I'd have before everything changed. Just mine, constructed carefully from honest pieces. The Veterans Resilience Network promotes me to program director. It's more responsibility, more visibility, more days when I have to be on even when I'd rather hide. But it's also more impact. We expand our peer counseling program, add art therapy workshops, partner with 3 new VA hospitals across the state. I hire 2 more staff members, both veterans, both people who understand that healing isn't linear and help isn't weakness. One of them is Corporal Williams, the same Williams the first pulled from the burning vehicle in Helmand Province. He found me through the network's website, sent an email that started with "Not sure if you remember me, but you saved my life in 2019. We met for coffee and he told me he'd been struggling, had almost not made it through the first year home, had finally found stability through peer support. Now he wanted to give that back. I remember you, I told him. You were trapped under the door frame. You kept apologizing for being heavy. He laughed, surprised. I can't believe you remember that. I remember everything I said, and it was true and terrible and something we both understood. Working with Williams is strange at first, this tangible reminder of the worst day of my life sitting across the desk, planning outreach events and reviewing grant applications. But it becomes something else over time. Proof that the work mattered. Proof that survival is possible. Proof that we can build futures from the wreckage of our pasts. Maya's family reaches out to me in September. Her sister found my name in Maya's letters home, tracked me down through military records and social media. She's planning a memorial event for what would have been Maya's 30th birthday and wants to know if I'll speak. I almost say no. The thought of standing in front of Maya's family, her friends, everyone who loved her and lost her, feels impossible. What right do I have to speak about her when I'm the one who survived? What words could possibly be enough? But I think about what I told those ROTC cadets, about courage being the choice to show up even when it's hard. So I say yes. The memorial is held at a community center in Brooklyn, Maya's old neighborhood. The room is packed with people who knew her in all the ways I didn't: childhood friends, cousins, neighbors, her ballet-obsessed niece who's now 11 and graceful in a way that would have made Maya burst with pride. Photos of her cover the walls, Maya at every age, smiling in all of them. When it's my turn to speak, I walk to the front holding handwritten notes I don't end up reading. Instead, I tell them about Maya in the desert. How she could make anyone laugh even when everything was terrible. How she kept a stash of terrible candy that she'd share on the worst days. How she talked about her niece constantly, showed everyone photos, planned to take her to see Hamilton when she got home. She died trying to help someone else, I say, my voice steady even though my hands aren't. That was who Maya was, always moving toward people, even when it was dangerous. Even when it cost her everything. I tell them I think about her every day. That I've built a life that tries to honor what she would have done if she'd had the chance. That grief doesn't end, but it changes, becomes something you carry alongside joy instead of it. Maya's mother hugs me afterward, holding on longer than comfortable, and whispers, "Thank you for being with her. Thank you for not letting her be alone." I cry in my rental car for 20 minutes before I can drive back to the airport. But it's not the hollow crying of early grief. It's the crying that comes from connection, from being witnessed, from speaking truth that needed to be spoken. When I text Avery from the airport, I tell her it was hard but right. She responds with a single word, good. My relationship with my parents continues its slow, imperfect evolution. Marlene starts volunteering at the Veterans Resilience Network one afternoon a week, doing administrative work and answering phones. At first, I'm not sure how I feel about it, my workspace becoming shared space, my mother in proximity to my professional life. But she's good at it, warm with the veterans who call, efficient with paperwork, careful not to overstep. One afternoon, I overhear her on the phone with a young woman recently returned from deployment. The woman is crying, talking about nightmares and family who doesn't understand. Marlene listens without trying to fix it, without minimizing it, and says gently, "It's real what you're going through. It's hard and it's real and you deserve support." When she hangs up, she sees me in the doorway. Our eyes meet. She doesn't apologize or explain or make it about her own growth. She just nods slightly and goes back to filing. But something passes between us, acknowledgement maybe. Understanding that she's learning what she should have known years ago. I say, "They're more than that." He understands. I can see it in the way his jaw tightens, the way he nods and changes the subject to something easier. But he keeps building, and I keep visiting, and slowly we construct our own kind of language. Evan and Sarah have a baby in the spring, a daughter they name Claire. I'm terrified the first time they ask me to hold her, certain I'll do it wrong, that my broken pieces will somehow transfer to this tiny, perfect person. But when they place her in my arms, she just looks at me with unfocused eyes and yawns, completely unconcerned with my damage. "You're a natural," Sarah says, and I want to argue, but Claire chooses that moment to fall asleep against my chest, and something in me that's been tightly wound for years loosens just slightly. I become the aunt who shows up, not perfectly, not without boundaries, but present. I hold Claire when they need a break. I bring groceries when they're too tired to shop. I tell her stories when she's old enough to listen, carefully chosen stories about bravery and kindness and doing hard things. I never tell her about the war, but I tell her about Maya, how funny she was, how brave, how much she would have loved to meet her. Dr. Rivera and I celebrate 5 years of working together. 5 years of twice-weekly sessions, of processing and backsliding and slowly, incrementally healing. She's watched me go from someone who could barely speak about the war to someone who speaks about it publicly. From someone whose family relationships were shattered to someone rebuilding them with honest tools. "You've done remarkable work," she tells me during our anniversary session. "We've done remarkable work," I correct her. She smiles. Fair enough. I ask her if she thinks I'll ever be fully healed, if there's an endpoint where the trauma stops affecting me. She's quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "I think you'll always carry it," she says finally. "But I think you're learning to carry it differently. Not as something that defines you, but as something that's part of your story." Does that make sense? It does. More than I can articulate. That summer, I'm invited to speak at a National Veterans Conference in Washington, D.C. It's a big deal, hundreds of attendees, prominent speakers, media coverage. The topic is innovative approaches to veteran mental health care, and they want me to talk about the peer support model we've built. I'm nervous for weeks leading up to it. This isn't a small university auditorium or a local fundraiser. This is the kind of platform where what I say might actually influence policy, might reach people who make decisions about funding and programs. The weight of it feels enormous. Avery flies in to attend. We meet for dinner the night before, and she can tell I'm spiraling. What if I mess it up? I ask. What if I say the wrong thing and it hurts the cause? Then you'll recover and try again, she says simply. Stephanie, you've been doing this work for years. You know what you're talking about. Trust yourself. I'm not sure I know how to do that. Then practice. Right now. Tell me one true thing you know about yourself. I sit with the question, really sit with it. I know I show up, I say finally. Even when it's hard, I show up. There you go, Avery says. Hold on to that. The next morning, I stand backstage in professional clothes, heart pounding, notes in hand. Through the curtain I can hear the moderator introducing me, listing my credentials and accomplishments. It sounds like she's talking about someone else. But when I walk onto that stage, something shifts. I see the audience, so many faces, so many people who've served or who support those who have, and I remember why I'm here. Not for glory, not for recognition, but to make the path easier for the people coming behind me. I talk about the Veterans Resilience Network, about our peer support model, about the power of being helped by someone who truly understands. I share statistics about our success rates, testimonials from veterans we've served, concrete data about what works. But I also talk about the human element, about what it means to be seen, to be believed, to be supported without judgment. Traditional therapy is crucial, I say. Medication saves lives. But there's something irreplaceable about sitting across from someone who's been exactly where you are, who knows what it's like to come home and feel like an alien in your own life. That's what peer support offers: recognition, validation, and the lived proof that survival is possible. When I finish, the applause is sustained and genuine. People approach me afterward with business cards, with questions, with stories of their own programs. A representative from a major foundation asks about expanding our model to other states. A Pentagon official wants to discuss potential partnerships. It's overwhelming and energizing and terrifying all at once. But I take cards, make notes, promise to follow up. Because this is the work. This is what Maya would have wanted, her death meaning something, changing something, helping people who come after. That evening, back at the hotel, I call my parents. They answer on video chat, both of them crowded into the frame, and I can see they've been watching the live stream of the conference. "We saw your talk," Marlene says, her voice thick with emotion. "Sweetheart, you were incredible. Really incredible," Frank adds. "The way you spoke, the way you knew your stuff, we were." He trails off, but I understand what he can't say. That he's proud, yes, but also that he's finally seeing me clearly. Not the daughter he wanted or imagined, but the woman I actually am, broken and rebuilt, scarred and strong, doing work that matters with tools forged from pain. "Thanks," I say. That means a lot. We talk for 20 minutes about logistics and details, and it's easy in a way it never used to be. When we hang up, I sit on the hotel bed and let myself feel it, this strange, hard-won peace. This life I've built from rubble and determination, and the refusal to let trauma have the final word. My phone buzzes with a text from Williams. "Saw the talk. You killed it, Captain. Maya would be proud." I stare at that message for a long time. Would she be proud? I'll never know for certain. But I'm building a world where veterans have better support, where invisible wounds are taken seriously, where coming home doesn't mean suffering alone. That has to count for something. That has to mean her death wasn't for nothing. I text back, "Thanks. Couldn't do it without the whole team." But alone in that hotel room, I let myself believe Williams might be right. That somewhere, somehow, Maya sees what I'm building and knows it's for her. That my survival, my work, my stubborn insistence on truth over comfort, that it all adds up to something like meaning. Outside the window, Washington, D.C. glitters with lights and monuments and the machinery of power. Tomorrow, I'll meet with more officials, pitch more programs, fight for more funding. Tomorrow, I'll keep showing up. But tonight, I order room service and call Avery and watch something mindless on TV. Tonight, I rest. Because courage isn't just about the big moments, it's also about knowing when to stop, when to breathe, when to let yourself be human and tired and enough exactly as you are. And for the first time in longer than I can remember, I feel like maybe I am. That's my story. I can't change what they said at that dinner, but I can choose what I live by now: truth, boundaries, and the work of healing. If this hit home, like the video, subscribe for more real stories, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your turn. Have you ever been told your pain wasn't real? What did you do next? Where's the line between protecting family and protecting yourself? Would you forgive after an apology, or set new terms and keep your distance? Drop your answers in the comments. I'm reading every one.